So, all right, so now we have some more compositions of functions where one of them is an inverse. However, to do part E here, let me copy this down real quick. And math. So the cosine of sine inverse of 5/13. When you have information that is not on the unit circle, it is best to draw a picture. So let's draw a picture. In fact, I already messed up the picture, and I'll explain why in a second. Sine inverse returns in what quadrants? So sine inverse has a range from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Okay. So if sine inverse is 5/13, well actually, we can narrow this down even further. Since sine inverse returns in quadrants 1 and 4, sine is positive in which of those two quadrants? First. So when I draw my picture, I technically should not have drawn two triangles. Where should my picture really be? The first quadrant. So again, sine inverse returns in quadrants 1 and 4. Since the number in question, namely 5/13, is positive, that means we're only in quadrant 1. So if, for instance, we call this angle in here theta, where would I put the 5? In reference to theta? Opposite. And where would the 13 go? Hypotenuse. So we've seen this triangle plenty of times. What's adjacent to theta? 12. If we were asking about sine inverse of negative 5/13, where would your picture be? Fourth quadrant. Because sine inverse returns in quadrants 1 and 4, and sine would be negative there. So if the sine inverse of 5/13 we called theta, now we're trying to find the cosine of theta. So looking at this picture, what's the cosine of theta? 12/13, adjacent, over hypotenuse. So again, you have to know your ranges and your domains for your inverse functions, along with your all students take calculus. It's not going to go away. The inside function is cosine inverse. Cosine inverse returns in what quadrants? Quadrants 1 and 2. Since the number in question, negative 1/4, is negative, what quadrant do we draw our picture in? 2. So let's call that inside guy alpha, just to give it a name. So what goes where in reference to alpha? Or the reference angle of alpha, your choice? Is the adjacent and 4 is the hypotenuse. So now we have to figure out opposite of the reference angle. How do we figure out opposite of the reference angle? Pythagoras. Good. Pythagoras. You also only have the first two syllables there. So in your head, because you don't need a calculator, what's the opposite of the reference angle? Square root of 15. And why are we taking the positive one, not the negative? Yeah, so there you go. Sine's positive in quadrant 2, the y value. So looking at this picture, since we called the cosine inverse of negative 1/4 alpha, we're now going to find the tangent of alpha. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. What's the opposite? What's the adjacent? what is the square root of 15 over negative 1? Good. Okay, so again, if it's not on the unit circle, consider drawing a picture. Makes your life a little bit easier.